Hey everybody, Sprocket here. I'm back again. Gonna do a little bit of work on the Buick today. As you can see, what ends up happening to a car that sits in a garage, it's become a storage unit. So, gonna have to clear a little bit off of this thing, so that way I can move it out into the light. Plus there's stuff out there, beautiful sun out today. I'll have to move out of the way so I can pull this out into the sunshine a little bit. I haven't started it for a while, so it's always good for an engine to run once in a while. Same thing with the transmission, keep stuff flowing, keeps the seals from drying out, stuff like that. My plans, I'm going to be, if I can find them, I have a bunch of the little paper filters for the carburetor and the fuel filter to replace what's in there. So I want to replace one of those. I want to check the points gap. Of course, check the condition of the points. If they need cleaned up, clean them up. I need to check, because I was looking, basically making a parts list last night. And lower control arm bushings, there were two different styles for the rear one, either an oval or a round one, and I need to figure out which one I have so I know which one I need to replace. So, that among other things, I have to get done on this, so we'll bring you back when I got more. Woo, lights on. Yeah, for those of you that have an old car that does not have hardened exhaust seats, which this car is a prime candidate for that one, because that didn't start happening until the 70s, you'll need to put something to replace what they used as lead in the old fuels, so that way it doesn't eat up those seats into the fuel as a substitute. In this case, I'm using this Motor Medic lead substitute to put in there. Just wanted to let you know. Some people don't know that. So, anyhow. Okay, so, on these old carburetors, your fuel filter is up underneath this boss right here. I'm sorry about the lighting. Again, sun's out. Underneath this boss right here. Now, you got this one here that holds the filter in place because there's a little spring in there that keeps tension over against the gasket, so that way the fuel comes in and goes through the filter. And then you got this end, which is basically a flare fitting that you got to loosen up to be able to get out of there. Now, when you go to try and loosen up this here line, what you don't want to happen is for it to spin that one that's in the housing, because all these old carburetors are made out of pot metal. They're very weak. Those threads strip stupid easy. So, what you do is you set up your wrenches here like a scissor, and you give them a squeeze, depending on which way you want to go. There we go. That way, this one here, holding on the housing one, doesn't loosen up while you're trying to loosen this one up. So that's just a quick thing. I'd already known it, but there's a guy I watch on YouTube that does that. He explains that every time. It takes so much less force to do it that way than it does to try and use both hands and pull in opposite directions. So I'll bring it back when I get the filter out. I don't know how well you can see in there, but I'm trying to get it to where you can see. There's a layer of sediment down inside there. Now the hole is up there in the front. That's where the fuel goes down through. That layer of sediment we want to try and get rid of carefully, but we don't want it going down into the bowl because there's already going to be plenty of it down inside of there. Now, the old filter, try and get it a little bit better. Here's the old filter. Of course, there's the new one. Now, most of the time, of course, when these are wet, they're always going to look darker. This one is pretty much dry, so you can see how dirty it is. Now, in here, this is the housing I was talking about. There's the gasket for it. Now, this little gasket right here, get this out of here so you can see it. That is actually on the new filter attached. You can see right there. Okay? Obviously, it became separated from that one. But you look up inside here. Come on, focus. Focus! What the heck? Am I too close? There we go. Just so see all of there's a little bit of rust in there and then the sediment from the tank. Basically crap from sitting. So we get this all cleaned out nice before we go to put it in. See, I was telling you right here, there's a flare fitting. That's where that fuel line over there. Refocus. Come on, you can do it. There it is. That fuel line over there. Ding, right, that thing right there. That's what that goes up against and seals it in. Now, a lot of times what happens with these, they don't want to come loose. So, I don't know how well you can see this, but if you look here, all the corners on this nut are all chewed up. That's usually what ends up happening with these flare fittings, is these don't want to come loose. And what ends up happening most of the time is you try and round it off, trying to get it to come loose, and then you just grab a pair of vice grips and, you know, get it off that way. But these here, because it's a flare fitting, you shouldn't have to super torque it. If you have to super torque it, there's something else going on. This surface in here is not mating well to the one over there. So, something to keep in mind. Okay, so here's this little housing I was talking about. All right, I got it all cleaned up now. So in here is where the filter sits. Whoa, as I chuck it on the fender here. You want to make sure this is the end, okay? Fuel flows that way. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on the video, but either way. So the open end of the filter, you want going toward that. In this case, it's the side with the gasket. Close end goes toward the carburetor. Slide that in like this. Now what it does, this spring here, now you can see my shadow pointing at it. That spring pushes against this and keeps this pressed up against this housing when it's in the carburetor, so that way the fuel is forced to go through the filter and come out here and then go down through the carburetor, filtering the fuel. So I will show you more in a minute. Now don't do like I did and forget to put this gasket on the housing here before you go to put it in. That seals it. So, yeah, got to make sure that thing is in there before you go to put this in here. Alright, so everything's back inside here now, so you want to tighten it the same way you took it loose, like this, squeezing these together. But here's the thing, you want to make sure this one does not come loose again. You want to hold this one this direction while you're pulling this one to tighten. Now, like I said, you shouldn't have to way over torque this thing, because that flange fitting in there is what does the sealing. Now, unless there's something going on with that flange, it should seal nicely when you get this good and snug. Alright, so moving on to the breaker points is what they call them. Now, on this one, because it's a Buick 350, distributor's up front, because most of your Chevys are in the back. But, in fact, most of your GMs are in the back. I think Buick's the only one that's up front, but I could be wrong. So on this cap, you have screw right there. There's one just opposite on the other side. You just need a quarter turn, because they're spring loaded. They go up underneath of the distributor itself. The body has a plate down there that it holds up against. So you pop the cap off, and that exposes your condenser points and your rotor. So I'll show you more in a minute. Alright, so got the cap off, as you can see right here. Now, here's your rotor. You got two screws holding the rotor on. Now you could use a Phillips or you can use standard, because they got these big old long slots that are cut specifically for it. You just basically loosen them up. Now they should be to the point where they won't come out of the cap, but I don't know if these are or not. Yeah, these are. Most of them are, not the cap, but the rotor. So you unscrew those, get them all the way out. You pop your rotor out of the way. Oop, apparently I'm not all the way out. There we go. And get your rotor out of the way. Now this here is your mechanical advance. When you get up into RPM, these things are spring loaded and they come out, and that advances the timing. Now down under here, can you see this? Mm-hmm. This is your condenser, and your points, they ride on what you can't see right now because it's underneath this plate here. They ride on a little nub that has 8 little notches on it, and it opens them with each notch, telling each cylinder to fire on this. So what you got to do is you got to get the points where they're open on a high spot of one of those nubs, so you can set the gap to the correct amount. What I'm going to do initially here is I'm going to pull them out all together, so that way I can make sure what condition they're in and clean them as needed. Show you more in a bit. Okay, so here's the assembly. I pulled it out. Now this is a quote-unquote higher performance version because it's a one piece, which in my opinion is just a lot easier to deal with anyway. Down inside here, and we can see it, those are your breaker points. It's the open and close. Okay, now there's just a little bit of corrosion / carbon buildup in there because these things do arc a little bit. And they go bzz, bzz, bzz every time it sends a spark. Now the way to adjust these, once you mount it in, because you got these slots, these are just hard mounts. You slide that into the screws, tighten them down, you're good. This screw right here, this little Allen key, this is how you adjust open and close. Now on the cap, there's a window that you can open up and do that. Let me show you here. Over here. There's your little window. Now this one's kind of hard, but I have a new cap for it anyhow. But you would slide this up out of the way and then you can get that little Allen in there to adjust the dwell. Now I'm not real up to speed on how to adjust the dwell. Not yet anyway. I'll get there. It's been a while since I dealt with points. So anyhow, that and I got to check and see exactly what the point's supposed to be set at. Getting a feeler gauge in there is going to be a little tricky. So, yeah. Show you more in a bit. Alright, so reset the points. Got everything back in here. I just had it fired up. I let it fire up long enough to warm up. Top hose is nice and warm, which means that the thermostat opened up. Everything is flowing nice. No leaks right here at the carburetor where I did the filter. It's always a plus. What I also did was got a vacuum gauge here. Bloop. Plug that in to manifold vacuum right there where my finger's pointing. I pulled that out and plugged that thing in. Now what I did, there's a great video on this. A guy named Thunderhead 289 did this. What you do, which I don't know if you can see these, see if I can get in here. You just barely see those two screws right there. One there, and whoa, I'm blocking my own light. That one there. What you do, you want to turn those in until they just lightly bottom out. Back them out about 1 3/4 or inch, yeah, a turn and 3/4. That'll give you a good initial setting. Now you want to do this when the engine's warmed up. Fire it up, and then what you do with that vacuum gauge is you adjust it. Either go screw it out, screw it in. Basically you're listening for the idle to change or for it to get choppy or smoother, either way. And you're also watching the vacuum gauge to where it'll even out. So you do one at a time. And like I said, Thunderhead 289, he did that great video on that, and it just basically followed what he did to make that vacuum gauge needle even out. Now mine, it kind of bounces, but it stayed relatively in the same place. You just kind of split the difference. So once I did that, the idle smoothed out real nice. It takes the throttle a lot better, spins right up, which considering the age of this engine is pretty darn good. And the fact that I have not gotten into that carburetor yet except to do the filter, everything seems to be working nicely. So that's it for now. Have a good one.